Hi, my name is Rebecca Smith, Managing Director of Safe Hands, and welcome to the Safe Hands podcast. Today we wanted to touch on a subject that we at Safe Hands get asked lots of questions around, and it's a subject that our clients and prospects seem particularly engaged with at the moment. That topic is mental health awareness, and we're going to be looking at this purely from a company or corporate standpoint as well. Now, just before we move on, I've got some interesting stats for you here. So the World Health Organization reports that globally, an estimated 264 million people suffer from depression, and many of these are also suffering from symptoms of anxiety as well. On the back of that, it's also reported that depression and anxiety cost the global economy an estimated $1 trillion each year in lost productivity. Crazy numbers there. Did you know that?
So high. Yeah.
So high. Gosh. Now, although all of the team here at Safe Hands are qualified nurses, we also recognise that we aren't experts in certain specialist areas. Luckily, one of my guests today is... I'm joined right now by Mandy, Jassal, cognitive and behavioural therapist working at Priory Clinic here in Dubai. And she has kindly agreed to share with us some information on the signs and symptoms of certain key mental health issues, as well as giving us some advice on how to combat them. So welcome, Mandy.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm nervous.
Oh, don't be nervous. Don't be nervous.
I know how my clients feel now.
Yeah, don't worry. We're all kind.
And you feel like, you've got to get it right.
You're on the other side of it now. You're on the other side of it. You're going to be great. You're going to be great. I've also got another guest with me, special guest here with me today. Yeah. So like I mentioned, as well as looking at the clinical and expert opinions on our topic, we also wanted to explore the perspective of a company owner. And what better person to do that than our own company owner?
Oh,
so
thank
today
you,
we're joined by Danielle Suchley, CEO of Blue Sky Thinking Group, and cousin. Welcome.
Hi, guys.
Hi. So before we start, I'd just like to give our listeners today a little bit of insight into both of your backgrounds, if that's okay. I did a very brief intro there. But Mandy, if you just want to start by giving us a little intro.
Yep. So I've been working as a therapist, cognitive and behavioural therapy, and another really long title called EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy, which can specifically be used for problems like post-traumatic stress disorder. But I've been working for about 8 years as a therapist, and before working as a therapist, I trained as a mental health nurse. So worked in the UK, clients with all different mental health problems in a psychiatric hospital, in a care home, patients with Alzheimer's, dementia. But for the last sort of 8 years, I've been working mostly as a therapist, group therapy, one-to-one counselling with just all different problems, but mostly like the ones that you've mentioned, anxiety, stress, depression.
Sounds like we've got the right person for the job.
Absolutely,
Awesome. And Danny, we know each other quite well, but just for our listeners today, could you give us a little intro, please?
Yeah, so I'm the Blue Sky Thinking Group CEO. So I actually run the businesses, so Safe Hands, Benapol, and Finsbury Associates. Been in the region now for 15 years, and in kind of leadership roles over the last 11 years. And so I think, this is a topic that is kind of on every leadership team's agenda right now in trying to help and assist with this, because it's, I think awareness, whether that people are suffering with it more or whether it's just that our awareness has increased, I'm not sure which one that is, but it certainly seems something that we need to
talk about it more.
It's interesting that you said that, because cases are on the rise, whether or not that is because we're just more aware of it, people are feeling more comfortable talking about it, or we're just seeing more of it in general. I'm not sure, but cases are on the rise, and employers are wanting to engage on this topic. What do you think the contributing factors are for this rise? I'll start with you, Mandy.
Yeah, I think it can be so many issues, whether it's grieving problems, somebody may pass away in a family, it can be relationship issues, people might feel stressed with work, feeling the need to respond quicker to so many different things that are going on, so it could be workload. So all different kind of life events, things that are going on that might impact an individual just to feel overwhelmed and burn out from the different problems that are sort of going on in their life.
Burnout's a word I'm hearing a lot more recently.
Yeah.
Seems to be, it's a fast-paced lifestyle in Dubai, isn't it? And I think that work-life balance can be sometimes quite difficult to maintain. A lot of people come out here to work, don't they? That's their purpose in terms of moving to the region. And what do you think, Danny? Do you think this is a contributing factor to this? Just from
I think I appreciate what you're saying from a regional perspective, but I actually think globally, kind of on demand, we're just incredibly impatient, aren't we, at the moment? So whether that's we're ordering our food and checking up on a delivery driver to WhatsApp and emails, and anybody who knows me or works with me knows, all of those services and those business tools I use massively, and that increases that demand for, okay, I want an answer now. I think similarly, the increase in social media, I think that somewhat can distort what people's perception of kind of normal is now. So I think if we get caught in that Insta or that Facebook scroll where you're kind of observing people from the most kind of, they're at parties, they're doing all these exciting and amazing things, achievements in work. You kind of see that and you digest it, and that becomes kind of a normal, like what you believe to be a reality. And I don't think that's always the case. And I think that has there's a big factor around that now in terms of social media and its influence on people's mental health.
And I think it is really where we're spending our time. So if we're on Instagram or Facebook or sort of social media for an hour, 2 hours, you think, well, that's time of my life that I'm not able to spend with my husband or with my children or whatever else that gives you value and purpose in your life. We're sort of spending it on social media, and it just happens so automatically that you keep scrolling. But I think sometimes people forget to sort of step back and think about, what is it that I value in my life? Do I want to do something fun? Do I want something challenging? Am I trying to relax? What else can help me to relax? Rather than sort of going into the usual pattern of just checking on our phone and scrolling, which could just go on all evening.
It's habit though, isn't it? And I think that is massively, it's mindfulness, isn't it? So I know that I'm terrible if my phone is on the table. I will check it. So the dinner table, myself, my husband, I won't let anyone take their phone to the table, because I just know it's just
really
it's just so easy to sort of kind of lapse concentration, and before you know it, there's a conversation going on around you that you're completely not involved in.
And I completed some training for couple counselling, just part 1 of 3, called Gottman training. And one of the statistics, 67% of US families that don't sit together for meal times, or if they have their mobile, their distractions, their television on, it means that it impacts the children's results directly for their school exams. So, but that's 67% of families, so it's quite a lot of families that are not sort of sitting together or having conversations and that real connection and time together.
It's important, definitely. So we know that the sort of cases are rising. We've touched on why there. When it comes to corporates, how can employers identify the signs and symptoms of some of these key health issues in their employees?
So really big question.
Big question.
Big question. So mental health can be sort of devised into so many different disorders, so many different problems. Somebody could be struggling with psychosis, an anxiety disorder, different depression problems. So there are a whole load of sort of psychiatric disorders that individuals might be struggling with. But the different signs and symptoms, for example, for anxiety, might be feeling more irritable, they might be withdrawing themselves, they might feel agitated, restless. You might see somebody sort of pacing up and down more in the corridor, or leaving the their work space and avoiding situations. So that is sort of more for anxiety. For depression, it's completely different. We forget that the body and the brain, it's all connected. Depression is a physical illness. It's not just what's going on in the brain, but people experience it physically. So lethargy, heaviness, tiredness, lack of concentration, not being able to remember things. So it feels like a ton of bricks to really get their body out of bed and to get going and do sort of everyday things that we might be able to do 100 things when we're feeling completely healthy.
Yeah.
But with depression, it's a real physical illness to sort of get yourself up and do those simple things.
It's interesting that you mentioned the link to physical symptoms as well.
Yeah.
As part of what we do at Safe Hands, we do a lot of health screenings, and we actually do them internally as well. So we do health screenings across the employees within our group.
Okay.
And I think on the first one, Danny, we sort of saw the link, particularly between potentially stress and physical symptoms.
Yeah.
I think we screened 56 employees. And out of that, we had 7 come back as being severely hypertensive.
Wow.
Some of those readings were anomalies, luckily. A couple of them weren't.
Yeah.
But when we did the corporate analysis of that screening, we found that all of them worked in the same department. So they were all in quite high pressure roles at the time, weren't they?
Yeah.
So that was a prompt for us to look at sort of internal processes.
And strategy around that.
Yeah. And we implemented a lot, didn't we?
Yeah.
It was a wake-up call, but a good one nevertheless. But those are sort of symptoms that the employee didn't know that they were experiencing, and we certainly didn't know they were experiencing at the time.
Yeah, if the employee doesn't realise what the symptoms are, then they'll continue with sort of their workload until you sort of sit back and think, okay, I'm getting really high scores here. What's going on? Do I notice whether I'm getting a thought or a certain feeling in my body that something's too much, and I'm saying yes, but I can't really take something else on? So, yeah.
Do you think that kind of self-awareness has been, I know that it's something that I read lots of books on, listen to lots of podcasts around self-awareness and asking myself, okay, how am I feeling about that? Or, sort of checked. Yeah, and I think that's a really good practice for anyone to have. But do you think that self-awareness ultimately may prompt us now to, when there are periods in our life whether that's sadness from, maybe it's grief, maybe it's maybe it is exhaustion or tiredness, and it's pre-holiday, whatever it is. Do you think that there is a tendency now to kind of look to that and go, okay, it is depression, it is anxiety, when previously we may have kind of seen that as being, okay, just at the moment things aren't great? Do you think that there's a tendency to overlabel, or do you think that still there's not enough people coming forward?
It's a good question. I think now, because people are generally talking about sort of mental health much more aware of different symptoms or what problems might be coming up for people, there's just more of a conversation around it. So we're sort of on the lookout for those signs, how to support the employees, how to support family or friends who are struggling with something. So I think, it's probably more to do with, now that we have the awareness there, we're sort of trying to support them as much as we can.
And just going back to my original question, Danny, but from a sort of company owner perspective, do you find it difficult to try and identify when employees are potentially stressed out, if they're going through a rough phase in their life that could be impacting their emotional well-being, their mental health?
I think that the larger the organisation, the more difficult that probably is to address.
Yeah,
I think at the moment we have the size of the organisation means that there are still relatively strong friendships and connections with people within like that office space. Whereas as you kind of scale that and you're in thousands of employees, I think having that level of engagement and having the coffees and the lunches and the kind of check-ins that we probably as a business we still have, but I think that becomes increasingly more difficult as the organisation scales, and ultimately having that resource, so human resources in itself becomes really, really overly stretched. To be able to actually commit that time to, as I say, just it's a check-in, isn't it? It's making sure, how are you feeling now? Is it how things going? Anything you need help with? And I think that means a lot. I think that means a lot to people as well.
So would you agree that it's something that sort of has to feed from top down? Obviously, we've got our HR professional. They're the ones to sort of engage with the employees on a day-to-day basis, but ultimately direct managers, senior managers and above.
100%. I think down, right? Creating a culture. So I think, like anything, I think individuals have got to have some responsibility to be able to identify, how they're feeling, having that, stress, having that self-awareness. But I think ultimately, like anything within business, whether it's identifying performance management or identifying talent, identifying if someone's there's something not quite right, and actually digging deeper and wanting to understand and wanting to help and assist, I think is hugely important. I think that's a corporate culture that has to be fostered, and it has to be worked at, doesn't it?
It does have to be worked at. I think
But
that's where you're crossing that line from management into leadership, aren't you?
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of extra work involved in that.
Yes.
On that, what can companies do to try and make a difference when it comes to their employees?
I think, and just going on that, it's everybody's responsibility. Even like you being here today is fantastic to really sort of demonstrate from the above that everybody needs to just accept that we all have mental health, and it's just being encouraged and supported sort of from everybody. But I think it's everybody's responsibility, because you're not mind readers. If you knew that somebody was struggling, I'm sure you would sort of flag up that, you know, something's not quite right.
Try to support,
try and explore it. So it's not easy. We're not mind readers. So I think it's sort of everybody's responsibility, employees, to have that awareness themselves for what they are struggling with. But I think with techniques or how to support any employees that are struggling, the key thing is to just for them to feel they have a space to listen and talk about whatever they are struggling with. You know, sometimes we might feel like we need to help them find a solution or find the answers, but most of the time they've already gone through all of those sort of solutions and answers themselves. It's not that they can't work out what they need to do. It's just that so much is going on. They need a space to emotionally sort of let that out and feel comfortable that they can process it with someone.
There's lots of sort of feedback models you can implement as well, I suppose, to try and open up that conversation. Initially, you can do that anonymously, or you can have it direct from the team.
I think like having anonymously, I think it's great, but I think that has to be the objective, hasn't it? So in the same way as in our physical health, we accept that at one time or another, everyone is going to have a physical health issue, be it a broken leg or the flu or something more serious. And I think likewise, we have to acknowledge that everyone is going to have a mental health problem at some time.
In their life,
I know that after my second child, after having Bella, I really now retrospectively suffered with postnatal depression, but I didn't identify with it at all at the time. And kind of, I think I was pretty fortunate. I had a great support group that I kind of came through the other side of that, and it didn't escalate into something more.
So good,
but I also acknowledge that there was zero awareness from me at that time that I was going through that. But it was at that time, maybe I felt like it was like, okay, there's something really wrong if you know, you have depression, anxiety. Whereas now I kind of see it as, everyone's going to have that at some stage, like I said, with any physical health symptom.
And I think the more we talk about it, the more we try and normalise it, the more people can come forward and feel comfortable to come forward and talk about whatever the issues are. Because so many clients that we see, they often say, I wish I did sort of break a leg because at least people could see it. But with a mental health problem, you know, they find it difficult to have that initial conversation. And I think it's that first step, just having that courage to, take the first step to admit that they are struggling with something, however they might word it, and having a relative or a friend that comes into sort of an initial meeting with them at work. But at least it feels like they can overcome whatever they're struggling with.
Yeah, so just on the back of that, Danny, you say retrospectively you were able to identify that you're potentially going through that. Had you been able to identify that at the time, and I'm sort of directing this more at you, Mandy, what would you suggest people do about that? Obviously, there's so much you can do from a work perspective, or only so much you can do from a work perspective, but what sort of treatment options are there available when it comes to someone visiting your facility, for example?
There's so many. I mean, we have psychiatrists that are trained in the team, we have therapists that are trained with all different backgrounds, whether it's on relationships, whether it's on postnatal depression. But I think the first step with the client is doing an assessment. So helping them to establish exactly what problems bring them here for right now, what their triggers are, so what thoughts they might have that set them off to feel anxious or down, what physical symptoms they experience, and how are they trying to cope with it. So with cognitive and behavioural therapy, we're really looking at two key areas. Cognitions are just a fancy word for our thoughts, anything that goes through the mind. We all get thoughts, whether they're positive thoughts, negative thoughts. So the first step is establishing what sort of thoughts are going through their mind. And then the behaviours are how the individual is trying to cope. So are they avoiding talking to people? Are they avoiding going out with friends and family like they would have used to? So it's sort of two things with cognitive and behavioural therapy as one approach. Understanding what those negative thoughts are and what are the unhelpful behaviours, the actions, self-defeating sort of behaviours that just create that vicious cycle that you feel stuck in.
Yeah.
Again, it's taking that first step, isn't it? Opening up the conversation.
The first step is the most difficult.
Yeah.
The courage to just go there and have that conversation. And if it feels too difficult, speaking about it, putting it in an email, taking a friend with you, but just taking that first step can really feel like it benefits them in the long run. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I've learnt a few things today. I've got to say some valuable information sort of imparted there. I'm going to leave you both with one question before you wrap up. What do you hope the listeners will take away from the episode today, the podcast today?
I just hope that anybody that is struggling with sort of any kind of mental health problem feels that they can reach out for support, because there's so much support out there, but we can't do our job as therapists or as psychologists if people don't come forward to us. So we want to help, but we can't help if nobody's coming out there to us. So if there's anybody struggling, just take a friend with you, write it down in an email, but receive the help, because there is support out there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think from my side, it's to acknowledge that at some stage or another, everyone's they're gonna struggle with this, and I think making sure that not only are you kind of asking for help, but if someone's asking you for help, kind of we all have that tendency sometimes to play things down. And I know when after having Bella out, when I was struggling, I'd sort of say to friends or family, like, I'm really struggling with this. But it was kind of like, well, you just had a new baby, of course you're struggling, you're working loads, and they were doing that purely from a perspective of trying to reassure me that it was normal, which it is. So many women suffer with that. But I think maybe at that time, just kind of reflecting and going, okay, does this person need actually to explore this further, rather than having a kind of an off-the-cuff response? And that's important, whether it's a friendship, family, or actually in a working environment. I think
making a space for it.
That empathy, and I suppose ultimately on a corporate level, it's that emotional intelligence, isn't it?
And probably patience, because, which we're not very good at now. So it's kind of going, you're feeling better now. But maybe taking a little bit more time over it.
Perfect. Well, I just want to say a massive thank you to you both for coming on the podcast today. Like I say, I found it valuable. Hopefully our listeners have today. Big thank you for joining us. And as always, let us know what you thought of today's episode. If you enjoyed it, let us know. Give us a like, give us a share, leave a comment, send us a DM. Whatever you want to do. Like I say, feedback's always welcome. Thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned for the next episode.